Welcome to your weekly corner Späti. It is myself, Nick, and I'm joined with Rob from Podcasting is Praxis. Thank you for coming on so last minute so I could bitch about NATO with you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And also I'd like to welcome the third comrade, which is Comrade Medium-Sized Fan, because it is 34 degrees here right now, and I am dying. So if the
Oh, yeah. And today in Berlin, it's like 30, and it's been on and off, like raining all day. So it's brutally humid. I think I've taken 3 showers today. And it's bad. And I live on the ground floor, so it is like cooler, but nothing matters now.
We're just doing that thing where we keep like the blinds and the curtains closed, so like that keeps out the direct sunlight, which cools the apartment down. But the downside is that I live in some sort of permanent half-shaded existence, so I never go to sleep and I never wake up. I just kind of stumble around the joint the whole day, feeling warm.
Yeah. Oh, I feel you there. I have. I don't think I've properly. No, I take that back. I slept pretty well last night, but it has been just like, waking up in a pool of my own sweat. Fucking disgusting. I love Berlin summer, but I don't like what I have to do in order to enjoy it. Like, I don't know. I've gotten
at least
used
like
to the
we have like the lake here, so like it is entirely likely that I will go out for a swim when we're done recording here.
That sounds good. Well, I already kind of mentioned what this week's episode is about. We are talking strictly about NATO, and if you think that it's just going to be like that, we're covering the recent NATO summit that was in The Hague. No, we're not. This is Corner Späti's reminder to you that NATO is evil. It is perpetually evil, and there are levels to its evilness, and just kind of like where it stands now, I guess. So I thought that, it would be nice to get someone on as well, just to kind of shoot the shit with this about, because I don't need they're doing this thing that, Mark Rutte said this thing and the NATO's getting behind it. It's like, we get what it is. Every time it's the same thing. Russia's evil. China's evil.
Iran is evil. Don't forget Iran
is evil now. Yeah, Iran's
North Korea is evil.
North Korea they never really mention North Korea though ever in these things.
Like, no, rip to those guys. They, it's like, they put in so much effort, and then just everybody's like, oh, wait, who?
Yeah, the only one. Well, I guess Russia has a massive nuclear program, but yes, North Korea, putting in work, getting a functioning nuclear program, and NATO doesn't even recognize them. I mean, I guess there is that like other like NATO adjacent organization that then, like South Korea and like Australia help with military drills, where they
I forget what it's called.
I forget the name of it, but yeah, where they fake invade North Korea every single year. Like, I too would want a nuclear weapon if the largest military exercises in the world are conducted every single year on my borders. So, critical support where critical support is due. But yeah, I mean, I guess first and foremost, kind of going into it, we have to talk about at least just the embarrassment that was Mark Rutte just simping as hard as he could over Trump. And it was twofold. The one that then, which I love the fact that I just gave you like basic notes and you typed out the whole tweet. Not
all of it. The whole thing was like pages long. I tried to find it, but like most newspapers don't want to cite, I guess, from, Truth Media or Truth Social, I guess. So like all you get is like, Trump said this about this and quoted some text, which then they don't quote. I'm like, why? Well, I mean, I know why you're doing this, but yeah, I got the the important bits. But on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, Mark Rutte is like simping. But on the other hand, I'm like, if you're the secretary, this is not a defense of Mark Rutte, who I loathe and despise. But it's like, I kind of get that if like your deal is to like be the NATO guy, is like, oh, Mr. Trump, is very sensitive to people kissing his ass. Well, then why not?
Yeah, and the thing that I loved about the text too, which I do have the entire thing pulled up. I can read the whole thing just because when I read this, like it was sent in the Corner Späti group chat, and I thought that Trump sent this to himself. Where It's just,
that would be.
Yeah. Mr. President, dear Donald, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes
why is that? Can I just ask? Like,
no, like that's the thing is that it sounded like Trump wrote this to himself though, because it's just like, you are the best, you're number one. You're doing the line of you're doing something no one else could do is really the thing of just like, that is a Trump statement. That is, maybe Mark Rutte has been like, in the lab with the pen and a pad trying to like sound like Trump to write him in order to like boost his ego. But it's just so pathetic, and it's just a level of simping that Jens Stoltenberg would never do. And the thing that then I just find even funnier too, especially because you guys being a podcast that covers the UK, is that then it made me very quickly forget that Boris Johnson was also supposed to have Mark Rutte's role. And
briefly, I remember this was the story.
Yes, and I don't think even Boris Johnson would have like simped this low. There is something about like, I think that Rutte just, grateful for the fact that his political career somehow is not completely over. And
the fact that man's career is still not over. I mean, he was at the helm of the Netherlands for 10 or 12 years off the top of my head. And just how's motherfucker? Like, I am Dutch, like, by the way. So like, I have a deeply personal beefs with the fucking, I can't stand that man.
No, I mean, like this, all the hatred that I had towards him to begin with just got, it was just threefold with this message. And he then continues on to saying, then, Donald, you have driven us into a really, that's great, English usage right there. Important moment for America and Europe and the world. You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done. Europe is going to pay in a big way, as they should, and it will be your win. Safe travels, and see you at His Majesty's dinner. Which I thought when he mentioned His Majesty, I thought he was calling Trump this, until then I realized that the
Dutch still have a king. Yeah.
So when I saw that first, I was like, oh god damn, he's simping so hard. No, all right, yeah, the Netherlands is a weird country. And
it's a very strange country. But on the other hand, I mean, what I can imagine with this, like, I don't know, at least with these messages, and God knows what else this guy has sent, is like probably like a big team of guys has like workshopped these tweets for like 3 days, and like, really, there's probably like 5 intelligence officers that do nothing but like, write tweets from Mark Rutte to Donald Trump.
100%. Yeah, they're like. I believe that Mark Rutte believes this, of course, and especially in the sense of that then, I mean, we can also talk about the other elephant in the room just to get it out of the way, when then he did sit with Trump and, did that weird conservative thing where they're like all like just like too sexually aroused with like the daddy concept.
Oh God. Oh, ew. Yeah. I've seen it in. We talked about Praxis cast. There was a guy a while ago also in the UK who like just called him, when I think it was when Trump won, he was like, "Oh, daddy's back," or some incredibly like fucked up shit like that.
Yeah, it was Tucker Carlson who was I think it was like CPAC or whatever, where he's like, America needs daddy again. Daddy has to like, spank America or whatever, like it's a level of like bizarre sexual frustration that then just like, it manifests itself in these like, masculine, I don't want to use authoritarian, but yeah, sure, whatever, authoritarian figure sort of thing. And yeah, that was enough that I think that there should be an international, well, at least a NATO-wide call to fire Mark Rutte and put Boris Johnson into his rightful place as the head of NATO. The man who single-handedly fucked up a bunch of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, is the perfect man actually for the job. But,
yeah, I mean, to be fair, like, I mean, I don't know. I think always with these things, with these summits, right? With the, Europe's going to pay in a big way. And it's like, are they? I mean, I don't know if you want to get into this now or later, but it's like, are they really?
Oh, no. It is. This is an open platform today of talking smack.
Yeah, it's just like, but are they really? Because like I read through that actual announcement, and it's like, yeah, we will get to 5% by 2035 with a spending review in 2029 when you're maybe in your last year of your second presidency. And, you know, it's not 5%, it's 3.5% plus, you know, if we add in border security shit, which we already do, plus like some cyber shit we already do for like another 1.5, then you get to 5%. And like, look, I'm not in favor of like more military spending in Europe. I think it's just like a gross money sink for like the worst people in the world. So like, and less is better. But at the same time, I'm just like, well, you know, like it's not, they're not going to get to 5%. This is just like, you need to, you need to just keep like the big baby happy with like just a sucker, essentially. It's just, it really is that crass and stupid.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing too, that going back to Trump 1, where Trump then made a big deal that he managed to get the CDU to sign on to Germany hitting the 2% threshold, you know, the old one, and Germany like still kind of really hasn't done it. I mean, they've I guess done it now in the sense, but the main problem that then a lot of these countries have, Germany probably being the most like, you know, the largest offender of this, is that then if Germany goes and spends, you know, whatever 5% or 3.5% plus the extras into GDP is, which Germany does already spend a bunch of stuff with like European border control stuff and how the Bundespolizei functions. And that's a whole other different topic in itself with how Germany funds Frontex and la da 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 da. We've done entire episodes on this. I don't remember exactly which ones, but like there is this there was this push during Trump 1 where then Germany then finally signs on to, okay, we're doing the 2% thing. And Trump was like, wow, finally, great. This is a thing that's happening. But Germany doesn't have like the numbers for recruitment. You know, they've tried every which way whatsoever to.
Yeah, nobody wants to. Why the fuck would you want to join the armed forces? Like, I mean, especially now. Like, I mean, I know the German military. I don't know the details. I'm sure you know much more than me, but I know that it's essentially a shambles and has been for like an incredibly long time.
Oh my God. Yeah. They just throw money at consultants, and that is pretty much it. And like the German military, like the Bundeswehr at the moment is trying, like they keep saying like, oh, we need this like 200,000, you know, standing army number, and they can't get to it. And so now, kind of like the trifecta of all scary things that then has happened. One being, of course, like Russia, which we can talk about in a bit, or I guess Russia, Ukraine. Two, the one of, you know, Germany's like solemn, you know, devotion to Israel no matter what. And then now the possibility of then Iran and / China, which I don't know how big Germany I don't think takes China as an actual like military threat, the way that some like other nations are a bit too like balls deep into the China's like scare.
Yeah, but China's always, I always love it when like in like a defense context when people try to like sort of make that equation between China and like Russia as in terms of like, oh, the big enemies and stuff like that. But it's like you can always see them like with Russia, they're like, yeah, Russia, evil empire, you know, Gargamel in a tower, the worst people in the world, you know, can't trust them, can't do anything with them. But then the second it comes to China, it's like, we will continue a strategic engagement with China. It's like, yeah, they have too much manufacturing and too much of your money, and they are too powerful, and you simply cannot fuck with them anymore. So none of those countries, the UK does this all the time. It's like, our strategic but difficult partnership with China. It's like, yeah, that's because you can't fuck with them. It's really simple like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was this instance where, like, I think it was like Lithuania made, like, they acknowledged Taiwan as like its own independent country, and after I think like 3 days, they took it back. They were like, oh, we're like they opened up an embassy for the Republic of China or something like that, or they were said that they were going to. They didn't actually do it. And then within a week, they're like, actually, no, we're not going to do that. Because exactly that. You know, yeah, it is. China controls too much of like the stuff that, one, economic partners, all the fucking debt that they control of a bunch of countries. It's just not going to happen. And it is always even the thing, too, of like, I saw one of these like dipshit, what are they called? Like the open source intelligence people.
Oh, God, the Brown Moses types.
Yeah, exactly. And he was trying to be like, oh, is China secretly selling arms to Iran so they can like funnel them to Russia? And it's like, China's not secretly doing that. They're just openly doing it. You're not uncovering some
some vast conspiracy.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, they're sending all this fuel for Iranian rockets. It's like, yeah, Iran's allowed to have friends. What? I don't see what the problem is. Given, yeah, I get in the sense that then it's like the West doesn't like them, but this like constant thing, which I guess kind of like can like lead into the sense too of like the massive like contradictions that NATO is currently having, is that then like ideologically it is kind of barren at the moment. There is this thing of like exactly to the sense that then that of NATO and the Western countries kind of can't get their idea around like what to deal with China because of the realities of geopolitics. There is then this kind of just like leftover, yes, there's the Russophobia that then is tied into it, but I always get just more so the sense of that then I don't know what NATO is supposed to do now. I understand that then in the sense that it's like, okay, well, ideologically, we're all these like similar countries and this and that and that. It's all of Western Europe. Sure, fine. Well, not all of it, but a good portion of Europe. And you're allowed to join on. But all of the caveats that then that are attached with it really kind of still, it's very stuck in its like Cold War, foundations, while then trying to then be a more modern, obvious, U.S.-backed hegemonic staple, but is kind of unable to do so because of its like there isn't really anything that NATO can do, but just kind of tell nations of like how much money they need to like put into defense.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that, like, I mean, why is NATO still around is obviously like it's a fascinating question. I think it's essentially like if you want to be really like short about it, I think the answer, like the straight answer, is just like, well, NATO. If the conflict was between NATO and the Warsaw Pact or NATO and the USSR, it's like NATO won, and the victor tends to like do a little end zone dance on the field. And I think the other reason NATO is still around is very simple. It is a way for Europeans to not pay for their own defense and kind of just let the Americans do that for them, which like I am in general opposed to defense spending, because I think defense spending is just like, apart from, the obvious moral issues, it's like defense spending doesn't produce anything useful. Defense spending just like, I know Merz is now really into like, oh yeah, we're going to build like all these factories and we're going to build our own ammunition and all the stuff. It's like, that sort of military Keynesianism is what these people really like to call it. It's like, oh yeah, we will do social democracy, but by way of guns and bombs. It's like, for one, all right, some people will get some jobs, but like if you employ a construction team to build a hospital, you have a hospital, and a hospital is great because it treats sick people, or a school or a park or anything useful. Whereas if you build guns and bombs, what you have left is, well, guns and bombs. And those things are never useful. They're just, the only thing that happens, and I mean, other people than me have expressed this better, is like what you do tend to see is like it's not monocausal, but like once nations start building up gigantic stores of guns and bombs, at some point somebody's going to say, well, what does that button do instead of do diplomacy, essentially?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And I think in the sense of, you see this in, because there is like, again, like NATO in its construction is very weird, because like it, as mentioned, it dictates the sense of how much you should then spend. The United States, and I think that you're right, up until pretty much Trump, there was never really a care in the sense that, I think in the sense actually that liberals liked the idea that these European countries didn't spend as much, because then the reliance on the United States was a lot higher, which is something that then for like U.S.-led liberal interventionism and stuff like that is, or even the neoconservative like take on it, which is kind of the exact same thing, just you just acknowledge that you're evil, was kind of fine with the United States being the leader in all of that. And the push for then Trump to kind of ask these other countries to pay their way, I think that you're right in the sense that there are a few countries, because yes, 5% of GDP for each one of these countries means that then you're going to have very unequal militaries. First off, like the 5%, like the 5% of France or Germany's GDP is not the same as like Lithuania's or Greece's, or anything in that matter. And so, yes, like the Baltics have been spending their 2% for quite some time and have insignificant militaries that just kind of like hop on to like NATO missions when they can, so they can pat themselves on the back of like, look, we're doing something, you know, like Luxembourg even like sent troops to, you know, Iraq.
I always love it when Luxembourg sends like 5 guys and, you know, 2 of them turn out to be like reservist photographers or some shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but the sense of that then when you see, you know, France or Germany or the UK for that matter, you know, beefing, you know, putting a lot into their military spending and really beefing up their arms industries, with then possibly having the problem of Germany of not really having a standing military, is that then one, it's like, okay, fine, Germany has a bunch of toys that it can like, you know, sell to all the despots of the world like it's been doing now forever. You know, the fact of Germany building, I mean, for example, one of the factories in Berlin of Rheinmetall that used to be for auto parts is now switching over to tank part manufacturing. And this type of stuff has obviously come on, you know, the curtails of the Ukraine war, and especially the genocide in Gaza, because Germany is one of the biggest partners, at least to Israel, and they've been kind of dragging their feet with Ukraine. But France, on the other hand, which we've talked about like kind of ad nauseum on the show recently, is perfectly fine with the idea then of beefing up their military, because Macron's idea then of like, well, sure, if this is an excuse for me to then like spend more and to do the thing that then I'm doing and to create this idea then of this kind of Gaullism that then he's always kind of had. The idea
neo-Gaullism is one of my favorite things. I love it when Macron goes goes for that shit. It's like that thing that he suggested a while back, which I still haven't forgotten because it never stopped boggling my mind when he said, well, why don't we extend the French nuclear umbrella to more countries? Like, why don't we do the US thing and like install nuclear missiles, you know?
They wanted to send them to Germany because, yeah, like France offered to send it to Germany because Germany is obviously on, you know, the Germany is one of the countries that has a shit ton of U.S. bases in it and is protected by the U.S. nuclear umbrella. And then like the threat, of course, of Trump possibly pulling out of the NATO stuff, which now is kind of not a question anymore. Yeah, France is perfectly fine with taking a role of becoming quasi like, if there were to be another NATO for Europe, France would be the head of it, and they would probably do a fine job. And I don't mean a fine job in that I would agree with it, but I mean like France as a military power is like quite good at doing the evil stuff.
Yeah.
They have quite the reputation. Or Germany, like, you know, Merz the other day after the NATO summit then did this whole fucking just disgusting ad just with all these, you know, cool, like it looked like the shit that you would see in the US of like, oh, join the Navy. Here's like a fucking picture of like a, you know, F-14 or something like that. And a guy in like a Navy thing, like giving you a thumbs up or whatever. Merz did this whole thing of that thing, like, oh, Germany is gonna like, you know, turn itself into the leading military power of Europe. And it's like, first off, I don't like the way that sounds. Second, this is a country of like absolute babies. It's not gonna happen. No one in this country is gonna like die for anything that Germany is gonna get in a war with. No matter how like right wing this country gets, I think that there is a general like attitude in Germany that then is like, well, I'm not going to die for Ukraine, or especially not Israel, where you know, 78% of Germans now are against like Germany's involvement in the genocide in Gaza. So it comes at a very odd time as well too, at least for this country, where then, I mean, we just had our first Veterans Day.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, the UK started that like 10 years ago. The Dutch did it about the same time. It has, but yeah, but there's that, yeah. Sorry, but keep going. I know, I have a lot of thoughts about Veterans Days and things of that nature.
Oh, feel free to add on then. Just simply saying in the sense that Germany kind of had this question of, well, we're doing Veterans Day. And then everyone had to beg the question of, what veterans do you mean? And, and they had to actually answer the question of, well, and this is where it gets really messed up, is that if you were a member of the Wehrmacht and you just happened after 1945 to then join the Bundeswehr, you are then included.
Then you're an okay vet. Then you're the good
You're
veteran.
an okay veteran. Yes, exactly. And same thing they had the question of, well, why is the NVA, the military of East Germany, why were they not, included? And it was then the same reasoning of like, well, if you were in the NVA and you joined the Bundeswehr, then you count as a veteran, but it is only for then the Bundeswehr. But they still like allowed for Nazis to then be honored in it. And it is really just kind of funny. I mean, one part of it isn't funny because I think that there is this attitude that not even just Germany is doing, but I feel like the rest of Europe, you see this in Poland as well. The Ukraine war, like, reset every nation's like insane meters, and the Hitler particle is like just like on fire throughout Europe.
Well, this sort of leads into my theory about like these Veterans Days, because like I see them a little bit from Holland. I don't follow Dutch news as much anymore as I used to, but like obviously because we have the podcasting as Praxis mainly about the UK, so I see a lot of like Veterans Day and War Christmas, so Poppy Day and stuff. Like, and what I think.
Thank you for wearing your poppy to come onto the show. By the way.
No, of course. I mean, I have an entire full back tattoo of poppies, so I can't not wear them on the show.
Exactly.
I carry the veterans around with me.
Absolutely, I have a NATO logo just tattooed on my chest. So
above your heart.
We're in good company. Yes.
No, but my general theory about this stuff is like, in the first thing is like with regards to Veterans Days is like Veterans Days, as the further removed you are from an actual like large scale conflict that involves the homeland in some matter, the more deranged it becomes, because it's always about like, when we started doing Veterans Day in the Netherlands, it was the same question, like, well, what veterans are we honoring? And it's like, well, the veterans of Afghanistan and, Kosovo and Yugoslavia, which, the Dutch in that particular conflict, and also Iraq and like the global war on terror and all that stuff, because like the Dutch are very much into that and the English even more so. It's like, all right, so what are we honoring? Well, their service, right? So their service in what? And then it becomes like unmentionable, because the thing with these Veterans Days is like, to me, it's no longer about some kind of actual like thank you for an actual sacrifice in defending some baseline principles we stand for. It's like, thank you for going over to somewhere in the Middle East to blow up some brown people, from a very long way away. And then it's like, well, what you're celebrating is not so much veterans. What you're doing is, and this is what liberals love, and I think this ties back into the 5% for NATO thing, is liberalism is such a dead ideology at the moment. Like, it has nothing left to offer, right? It doesn't offer anybody better living conditions. It doesn't give you a better material life. It doesn't offer you better healthcare or social housing. It has jettisoned after the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union. It has jettisoned all those principles, and it's just kind of like desperately trying to say, well, we can just go back to like the long 90s, which you can't. And what I think they do, and I see it with Merz a lot, and I certainly see it with Keir Starmer in the UK, but I think you see it a lot with a lot of like quote unquote social democratic or liberal prime ministers in government, is they are trying to displace their own total lack of ideology and conviction, and they're not offering you shit anymore, and they see the threat from the right, which they consider legitimate. So what they do is they grasp for, well, veterans and defense industry, because then you can do, I don't know if Merz has been doing this, but Keir Starmer's been doing this like a lot. It's like this, I will be photographed holding a gun, talking to a soldier, riding a tank. And it's like, look at my big dick. Look at us being strong and imperial. And, wouldn't you rather have us who are sensible but also strong than like, I don't know, Reform or AFD or Builders or, it's shit like that. It's like, it's a substitution for material policies. It's this flag waving shit. And in that sense, like that kind of military Keynesianism that I was mentioning slots very nicely into that, because it says, well, we can actually provide you with some jobs in some area, and it's okay, and nobody will get mad at us because we're building big, dick, shiny bombs. Look at me, look at my big, shiny metal penis.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, Merz hasn't been doing this, but Boris Pistorius, the defense minister of Germany, has, where he just like is on a tank, and yeah, like that has come into Germany in a much different way. I don't think that then I will be seeing, the Bundeskanzler anytime soon, holding like a G36 or whatever, being like, yeah, like, let's go Heckler and Koch, let's go Rheinmetall. But yeah, and the military Keynesianism thing is absolutely a thing too, that then even like the labor unions in Germany are kind of caught up with, where like
yeah, because it's jobs I mean, I don't know. I have very like mixed feelings about the labor unions, because like, of course, their job is to defend their members, and their members work in defense plants, and they want good jobs in defense plants. Like, yeah, on the short term, I see where you're going with that, but that is still a very shitty thing to do. And also, like, these people are not your fucking friends, like.
Yeah. And I think that then that you're the thing your point about then like the long 90s kind of never coming back is kind of like this perfect segue into the thing of like how also too that we got here, with the sense of like, NATO expansionism was the thing that was kind of off the table for quite some time, of like the not 1 inch eastward, this kind of promise, this the guarantee made by H.W. Bush, Thatcher, and Genscher being, kind of having this thing of like, okay, the Cold War's over, and NATO is going to exist in this thing, and then.
Well, it was also, I mean, those were like also in the politics of 1989, 1990. Those were critical promises for like, because Gorbachev had real problems keeping like the communists and the hardliners in his party like under some semblance of control at that time. And those promises were really like, if you look at sort of the parliamentary, like the quasi-parliamentary system that was, and the Duma that was emerging at the time, it was, and within inside the Communist Party of Russia, was like, it was genuinely critical that those promises were made, because it allowed Gorbachev to say, look, we can, dissolve the Warsaw Pact. We can stop being the USSR, because our previous enemies have promised us, verbally and in writing, that we are not going to do this thing.
Yeah. And then, I do think one of the funniest things, too, about NATO's open door policy is the 2 times that the Soviet Union and Russia applied for NATO.
Yeah.
Which, but yeah, so then this kind of emerged then as then this thing of like, well, this thing exists, if you want to join, you can, if you, kind of pass there's like a list of things that you kind of have to do.
There's it's called it's called the MAP, the something action plan, and it's like you have to stop, like if you're engaged in territorial disputes, you have to stop that. You have to like pay attention to human rights and all that kind of stuff. It's also interesting that like the Ukraine has already from NATO received like a dispensation with that action plan, because it conforms in like none of the ways.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's multiple violations that they have. And then, I mean, there's the thing too is also, I mean, one of the things as well, I guess we have to like, maybe put into perspective too, is that then it's like nations joining NATO at like in its beginning of its inception was also to like keep these countries at bay, like Greece and Turkey joined at the same time because they had a massive threat of communism that then almost overthrew both of the countries in the 40s and 50s. So then both of these nations kind of having these like nationalist governments that hate each other, putting them into this international organization is kind of like the West's like guarantee of like, okay, well, at least like these two, which there is a border dispute for, Turkey with Cyprus, but let's just ignore that one. And there are always like exceptions to the rule of things that NATO members kind of have always done in the past, but, The organization kind of, at least in that period of the Cold War, did have, as we mentioned, like a much more clearer ideological footing of what it stood for. And so then when, you see then all the Baltics then join, and, pretty much every former Warsaw Pact nation has joined except for like Belarus, some of the Western Balkans, and up until recently, like Sweden and Finland were out of it because they didn't feel the need to do so until you get the saber rattling going with Russia, Ukraine. And yeah, that entire promise then of the NATO expansion is not only just like out the window, it is literally like at Russia's doorstep now. And I, don't want to get too in depth into the many problems of the Ukraine war and stuff like that. But yeah, like as yeah, I mean, like as a nation that then is like hyper paranoid like Russia, a lot of stuff like kind of does make sense into the 2000s and 2010s with then their attitudes towards, hey, like you aren't supposed to be doing this thing. And, NATO just keeps, gobbling up nations, whether it be like Montenegro, which is a very weird one that then like Russia like literally tried to overthrow in like the mid 2010s or something like that. Because of exactly this problem of them joining NATO. I think was it 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, they're one of like the newer members. But yeah, I mean, nonetheless, like we are here in a period of that. Then we have like an ideological emptiness. Neoliberalism is at its like end point, it feels like. And there is this now massive organization of these Western countries that then kind of are all like in some way, depending on, who you ask, gung-ho to follow in line with if, shit does hit the fan with whether, I mean, obviously Europe's biggest concern militarily being Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too far into the weeds of like all the causes and counter causes of the Ukraine war. And like fundamentally, I'm also like, well, Ukraine is a sovereign nation. And if they wanted to join NATO, like, I don't know, that is within their right to ask. But it's also like,
oh, yeah, no, of course.
It will certainly, and much like with the European Union, but it's also like, yeah, but those organizations also have like a bigger responsibility, not least to their own existing members, that when the Russians say, because there's a long history of this, because it was Georgia and it's Transnistria and all these other South Ossetia and all these little breakaway republics where like the Russians prior to the Ukraine war kept warning NATO loudly and in writing, like, don't like will you fucking stop doing this? Because we're getting paranoid. And quite frankly, every war of conquest against Russia for the last 200 years has come out of the West. So they're not entirely wrong to be paranoid. And plus all the shenanigans that we did in the 90s with like
century,
keeping that fucking idiot drunk Yeltsin in power so he could like loot that country down to the last fucking beam of steel. And it's just like, I don't want to get too much into this, but like, as you are NATO and as you are the European Union, like you do have this responsibility that is not taken. And I think so much of this has to do almost psychologically with the fact that this is the Russian Federation. Because if you start paying attention to it, it happens so much more often than you think, especially in the media, where people, especially on television, will just straight out say the Soviet Union. They will not talk about Russia.
Oh,
they will just drop into, it's the Soviet Union. It's like, but what the fuck? I know you were raised during the Cold War, but like, can we, Yeah.
I mean, there is the amount of, and Germany does the exact same thing too, where they kind of like drop the mask sometimes and you get the bizarre moments where you have like Annalena Baerbock being like, oh, my grandfather fought, like where she was like talking to Ukrainian troops. And she's like, my grandfather fought against the Russians in this exact same spot. And you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, woman, shut your mouth. You are just pretty much being like, yeah, and Germany just really wants to, move eastward again. That's the vibe we're getting. And it's like, calm down. Again, as I said earlier, Hitler particle out of control, which is one of the funniest things, too, is that then Russia, because Annalena Baerbock now is the president of the General Assembly of the UN now.
Oh, God.
Russia, a broken clock is right twice a day, and they used that quote of her saying that she was glorifying Nazism as a reason why that she shouldn't be the head of the UN General Assembly. And I was like, you know what? They're absolutely right on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I always find I find sins of the fathers arguments very difficult because it's like,
for sure. But yeah, but it is the hilarious thing of that. No, because they like the specific quote of her like glorifying that her grandfather was like fighting in Ukraine, and Russia was like, no, like you can't have this woman as the head of the General Assembly when she said shit like this. Given like Russia's doing an illegal war in Ukraine, like they don't really have a nice footing to be standing.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not
not
a lot of like, I mean, you know, I'm not tanky to the point of just saying like, oh yeah, of course Russia was cool and good to invade Ukraine. That's insane shit. You know, I also think that's like 3 people who just spent too much fucking time on Twitter or X, the everything app, if you will. But like,
I have unfortunately met a few of these people, and they're all older, at least the ones that I run into in Germany. They're very funny. Like they will just like talk your ear off about how much they love Russia, and the thing that then is so funny is that it is one of the like only horseshoe theory things I believe to be true, to where like you mentioned that like the media will go and it'll just be like in their mouth of like they're just like saying the Soviet Union. A lot of those tanky people think the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's just I mean, but like that's like that's such a tiny minority of people that I'm just like I cannot take any of you serious for, you know, all the obvious reasons. It's just like we're kind of just past this. But it's like when you look at NATO now as an organization, and it's like I keep being told by, you know, by the papers and by everything that I'm supposed to find this like an important organization that does important work, and I don't like. Or that like my liberty, my personal liberty is in some way like contingent upon like NATO and like the, you know, the people standing on guard in, you know, at the Polish border or the Estonian border or the Lithuanian border. And I'm like, well, for one, to be fair, I was wrong because I personally did not think that like Russia would invade Ukraine. I genuinely didn't think that would happen. So like I'm perfectly willing to concede that I'm an idiot. But it's like at the same time, it's like, yeah, but they already have like a massive conflict going on in Ukraine. So like they don't, you know, I don't know how much room they have left for another conflict. And for 2, like, I mean, the Ukraine thing, like, yeah, it was a terrible invasion, but it came with extraordinary precedent. And for 3, like, even with this, like, oh yeah, Mr. Daddy Trump, we will pay you 5%. You know, it's like, should the worst happen, and I am wrong once again, and Russians do invade probably the Baltics, that's probably the most likely thing, right? Are you telling me that even with this like bullshit about the 5% in place, that like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, for that matter, would really like fly the 101st Airborne in to defend Estonia? It's like, I don't find that credible.
I think that this is a good point to then kind of bring up then like what then is the future of NATO then, if there is this, you know, existential threat to Europe that, you know, Europe has been yelling about forever. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I was also in the same camp as you. I did not think that Russia was going to invade, mainly because the sense that then Russia had a very good argument up until the point that they did go in, because Russia did constantly be like, hey, you're building up troops. We're building up troops now too. Stop it. You know, this and that and that. And yeah, I think that then once the fact that then Russia did go into Ukraine, their argument became moot, because then it proved then, you know, like I think they fell for the bait that I think NATO was kind of like holding in front of their head. And now 2, it delegitimizes the Russian state, at least for Western countries. There's a lot to be said, of course, about Russia's massive influence now in Latin America and the African continent. But nonetheless, Russia is definitely a country that then is quite unpopular within the general political sphere, unless you go to like the far right of most countries. But yeah, and I think that there is this kind of question that Ukraine partially answered with, you know, how important is then a NATO member or a possible NATO member or a country that then is under like, you know, NATO supervision if then something does happen to it. You know,
well, I mean, there was a, I don't know if you read it. It was, I think, a month ago now, maybe 2 months now. There was a very long piece and a very good, very scary piece in the New York Times about like how tightly interknit like the Ukrainian like strategic level command decisions are with specifically American intelligence and like satellite services and shit like that. Like basically the war in Ukraine is strategically run out of a German Air Force base. And like what you saw under Biden is like this constant mission creep of like, first the Americans say, no, you may not use, like, we won't send you guns and bombs. Then they say, we'll send you guns and bombs, but you may only use them inside your own country. Then they say, okay, you can use them inside Russia, but only like just across the line. And it ended like at the end of Biden's presidency of like them using like really sophisticated American intelligence tools, drones, and weapons to strike like these air bases 1,000 kilometers inside Russia. And it's like, it's hair raising how close to the line like you got between, the Russians saying, well, this is, yes, you struck our airbase, but it was American drones and American missiles and American intelligence that made it possible. We are now at war with the United States of America because de facto they are. It's just like the meat shield in the middle is the Ukrainians. And my sort of personal like bleak theory about all this is basically what the Americans are doing is, I don't think actually the Americans want to win. I think want the Ukrainians to win. I think the Americans want to like just like bleed out the Russian Empire. I think they want to do in Afghanistan too, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Lloyd Alexander III, who was, I think I don't know, he's not because he got cancer and he got removed from his position, but he was the head of Eurocom. And like 3 days after the Ukraine invasion says that verbatim, that is the reason why the United States is involved in the war in Ukraine is to bleed out Russia. So like that is coming like, from the horse's mouth. That is the reason why the United States has kind of been heavily involved into this conflict. Yes. And I think that that's also too the reason why, some countries have been less careful with this. France and the UK, for example, have been perfectly fine with sending munitions. Probably most notably, they like collaborate to make the Storm Shadow missile system, which is something that then has been used like a lot by the Ukrainians, where Germany has had this massive, back and forth of, oh, do we send this? Do we send that? Do we not? Eventually they do with like, tanks and howitzers and things of that sort. But Germany has still been very much on the on the defensive about not sending the Taurus missile system for that reason, because they're like, well, if they were to use a Taurus system, which is going to be very unlikely because you'd have to send German troops to Ukraine in order to use them. That would then involve Germany into the conflict in a sense that they are not willing to do.
Yeah, and also quite reasonably, because like the Russia, at the end of the day, part of the reason you can't do so much in this conflict is like, at the end of the day, Russia has the second largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, and that is game, set, and match. Like you cannot fuck with these people unless you are seriously willing to risk like planetary death. Like it's just,
And I think that that's actually then a good, like, kind of Ukraine's an interesting example because they're not a NATO member. They're not going to be a NATO member. It was kind of this testing ground to also then see maybe like the commitment of NATO members, this and that and that. But yes, the scenario that you brought up of, well, what if Russia does go into the Baltics or something like that? What is the level then of, the supposed Article 5 that exists of if you attack one NATO member, you attack all of us? Is that then ideologically then going to be held up in a period where then that we have just kind of seen NATO being used as exactly that, just a tool to bleed out another, counter imperial power or whatever you want to call Russia,
the old enemy, I think, is also like a pretty good term for it.
Yeah, and the sense of the matter is that then I do not. I mean, this is my opinion. I mean, I could be incredibly wrong with this. I think that it would only take the sense of then like Russia attacking, say, like Poland or something like that, for then involving a European-wide conflict. I think that NATO has member states that they're okay with sacrificing. They just won't say it aloud. Ukraine has shown.
No, but Poland's different. Poland is. I mean, Poland is also what triggered World War II. And Poland. I mean, if the long history of Poland is essentially like, at 90% of all like conflicts inside Europe from like the medieval era forward, and I'm just picking from Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast, is like and the unbelievable amount of it like starts and ends in Poland for some fucking reason. Like as either a direct casus belli or like two degrees removed. It's an insane amount that like is involved with that has the word Poland written in at the end.
But yeah, I mean, I do think in the sense that there are then though these countries that NATO is then okay with just kind of like, well, you know, Article 5 may exist, but you know, you're the Baltics, we don't care. You know, okay, we'll like try to help out in which way, but we're not going to like the United States is not going to then send troops if Lithuania gets invaded. You know, like it doesn't make, you know, tactical sense for them. First off, second, they would then probably do the thing that they're doing with Ukraine of being like, well, you know, Europe, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You got to help them out too, which is what, you know, Biden kind of hammered on. I mean, literally, Zelensky went around and did a tour of all of Europe being like, send more weapons, send more weapons, send more weapons, because that's kind of the only thing he could ask for, knowing that then that no nation's actually going to get militarily involved with this conflict any further. Yes, we've had countries like France or whatever come out and say, well, maybe we'd consider it, but the reality
there was that brief plan a couple months ago for like 2 weeks or something where like until they themselves torpedoed it, I think, where like the Russians and the British and the French said, well, what if we provide peacekeeping forces to sit between the Ukrainians and the Russians? And I was just like, what in God's, like, who's been on the glue on this one? Like,
yeah, there have been some absolute bonkers, like just, I don't even know how, you know, committed they are to any of this shit. But it was like, because remember, it was that fear of you know, Trump ditching Ukraine, where then Europe just lost its mind for a few weeks, being like, yeah, sure, I'll go to war with Russia, you know, I'll take it up, no problem, until then they realize the actual, like, you know, task that would be. But yeah, and I think it's like a good place kind of, I wrote in the notes as a joke kind of Gladio forever, of being the position that then I think that we find ourselves in Europe now. And
yeah, I mean, Gladio's, of course. I mean, look, it's your website, so like you know, you know better than me.
You know, Gladio pays the bills.
But it's just like, I don't think with that, it's like, you don't need to return to like the strategy of tension or like agent provocateur action. I think like NATO will be around as long as liberalism is hegemonic. Because
and
you don't like, and liberals also, quite frankly, also don't. The liberals we have today don't have like the dark stones, like, you know, the dark will to do actual like strategy of tension, years of lead shit. Like none of them, I don't think.
Oh, no.
Morally or like, you know, fortitudinally capable of that, which is good. Like, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
but like,
no. But so I think like, that then in the sense of like,
it's a bit like it's not as bad as the UN, because the UN's kind of just like falling apart because like we've just decided that world peace is just something we're no longer interested in. But NATO will be around because it's too useful domestically for too many people.
Oh, no, for sure. And I think that then that the reason that then I jokingly put the Gladio thing forever is that then I think that particularly, at least looking in the sense of the country that then I live in, to where then NATO and all these other organizations are just kind of these benchmarks of liberalism that then have just like, that just exist and that then are going to exist. And Germany's always going to be a member of it until it maybe dissolves or like, liberal hegemonic power disappears. But this inward turn of liberal hegemonic power in itself has become quite a problem within Germany, where then like the liberal hegemonic order now has like very much rewritten the thing of that. Then it's like, well, actually, the tenets of liberalism kind of don't really matter as much anymore. It has transformed itself once again to this thing of the Soviet Union made it easy kind of to then have this enemy elsewhere that was ideologically very clear and defined of what communism was. And we can then use the tactics of the state to then suppress communist organizations within Germany. And now this has been kind of turned on its head of that then, well, liberalism is just then, we stand for Western values. They're very vague. And in the sense of how then the state and state apparatus have been turned now against what then, the idea then of, France has been a thing for a while of like Islamo-Gauchism and whatnot, and in Germany becoming very militant against then, left-wing movements that then have been showing solidarity with Palestine. I literally saw I hate using the word comrade, but I'm just going to use it. I don't know, an acquaintance, I guess, got a letter from the German state of like where they are not allowed to go to because they have been at a protest that they weren't even actually at.
Yeah, that's insane shit. Like,
and it's the sense of that. Then it's like, I feel that then in the sense that this defense sort of like umbrella that we were finding ourselves in, that then it's like, there is no room to criticize Europe's position with Ukraine. There's no room to criticize Germany or the West's position with Israel. Don't even fucking get started on why we need to support the war against Iran if and should it start, or China or whatever. And I see that then that the sense of that there isn't necessarily the need for then like, yeah, there's not going to be a sense of wondering if the like, I don't know, the, Shia militias are just going to rise up in Germany and take it over. This is never going to happen.
Yeah. The 24 thing where they find prayer mats on the on the Mexican border, basically.
Exactly. Yes. The literal plot of one of like Steven Seagal's books that he wrote.
Yeah. Or that horrendous follow up to what's it called again? The sequel's called Day of the Soldado. The first one's quite decent with Emily Blunt. It's quite tense. What the fuck's it called again? Oh, well, that one. I'm sure half your listeners is like, it's this one, but never mind. So I just cut that bit. That was shit.
Oh, no. I'm leaving it in. Sorry. Because then our listeners can then chime in and be like, it's this movie. Yeah, like the sense of that, then I think that a lot of then the surveillance tactics in order to kind of preserve this liberal order we are then already seeing within this sense. And it doesn't even need to be in the sense of like a real actual like, coherent movement like the communist movements of the Cold War in the West were. It is then this sense of now we are in the permanent 2000s, it seems like, 2003 has never ended, it feels like. And it's been very interesting to then see then the norms of liberalism and liberal democracy or whatever being very heavy-handedly maintained. I mean, we see this goofily enough, we saw it with then something as dumb as like the BBC not showing like, Kneecap's performance yesterday at Glastonbury or whatever, just like dumb shit like that, but still in the sense of that, then it's like there's an active role now that then is being taken by the state in order to do this thing. And I think that this is like to do this level of suppression. And I think it is actually very tied up with the sense of that then what all of these kind of like international agreed upon things have become, NATO being one of them. NATO is a forever thing of liberalism. Not that you can't critique NATO, you can, but it is becoming this kind of like default position that then it's like, well, if you're a liberal democratic power, you need to like Israel, like NATO, like our war, like this, like that. And I don't know what level of like what level of state repression then can then end up existing in this in the current situation that we're in, where it is then it at least in Germany feels like that then that pretty much is going down to the sense that then if you just don't agree with the government at this point, you're going to like have some level of repercussion, to the sense that they've also.
Yeah. I mean, I also, but I think that's much more related, certainly in Germany, but also in Holland and certainly in the UK as well. Like that's not so much a NATO thing. That's an Israel thing.
Oh no, for sure.
Like that's just
absolutely.
Like, I mean, I'm not saying there are no connections between those two, because like, there are, but it's like it's not so cut and dried. I think like the test case for that kind of stuff was always with Ukraine, and you with Ukraine, like you could be against the war in Ukraine, and you could even be like against your like your government at some level helping the Ukrainian government without the threat of being put in prison or like having the cuffs slapped on you. So I think that is different. Like that's a different.
No, for sure. I'm not saying that then that these are like that this is necessarily a NATO thing. I'm saying more so in the sense of that then NATO being one of the tenets of liberalism, and liberalism kind of having then this moment right now where then it is doing this level of suppression, that NATO is simply just one talking point of the general like kind of, tokens of what it means to be a Western nation.
Yeah.
And it is like, with then this being a defense thing, like the level of them like defense spending that then is going into then the level of repression against this people is a thing that then is tied into then NATO defense spending, all this other type of stuff. The German police, for example, is hyper militarizing itself. These are all things that then are interconnected with then Europe, being coaxed into this idea that we have to then, one, militarize ourselves by spending more in defense, but also societally becoming far more militarized. So I don't think that then you're right. It is not necessarily a NATO thing, but it is a thing that then is influenced by.
Yeah, I mean, I think NATO is like a nice cover word for an activity that is essentially. I don't know. I'm repeating myself a little bit at this point, but it's just because liberals are grasping at straws because they don't have a consistent vision for the future anymore. They don't have anything to offer you. And this thing offers you a way to sort of pretend to be social democratic, but only for like a select in-group of veterans who are good because veterans. And for this sort of military Keynesianism, and especially for like, the CDU or the VVD in the Netherlands, or Labour in the UK, or Macron as well. It's like looking tough, being tough is like perceived for internal domestic politics as a way to head off the far right. And I can promise you it's not going to work, because it's the Coke Light problem. Yeah. Like, if you really want to big dick the military, like, the far right will give you more scope for more violence, and will also be the guys who say, thank you for building up this big military. Now what does this button do, basically?
Rob, I think that is a good point to end our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on quite last minute, actually, to have, I found it to be a very interesting conversation. Where can our listeners find you if they already aren't listening to your show or following you on social media?
Well, thank you very much. No, it was fun to talk about this stuff. If you want to like follow the podcast, so our podcast is called Podcasting is Praxis. We post under @PraxisCast on Blue Sky. I am @Trufflehog on Blue Sky. And essentially, the Podcasting is Praxis can be found everywhere that all podcasts are found. If you're more interested in like a sort of, Corner Späti is the pan-European alternative to our little corner of UK-specific psychosis. So if you like that kind of thing, then please do check us out.
Cool. Thanks a lot for that, and thank you for coming on. And we will see you guys on the bonus episode. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.